Imagine waking up every morning and knowing that before you pay for your home, your food, your kids' school, or your own retirement, a slice of your workday has already been claimed, locked in, to pay interest on somebody else's decisions. Not just for 1 year, but every year, for the rest of your life. That's what it means to live under a system where money is created as debt, where Congress runs permanent deficits, and where a small network of financial institutions sits at the center of it all. In the United States, that system is anchored by the Federal Reserve. Today, I want to walk you through a hard truth. How this structure functions like a form of financial control over the American public, how it feeds on endless debt issuance, and why so many people now feel that the country is being slowly strangled by interest payments and obligations that no one ever really voted for in any clear way. Start with the numbers. The national debt is now on the order of nearly $40 trillion. That's $40 million, an amount so large it's basically incomprehensible. Servicing that mountain of IOUs already costs close to $1 trillion a year in interest alone, and projections say trillion-dollar interest payments are becoming the new normal going forward. Think about that. Before the federal government spends $1 to build a bridge, educate a child, or send a social security check, it has to shovel something like $1 trillion a year just to stand still on past borrowing. Where does that money come from? You. Income taxes, payroll taxes, corporate taxes, and, when that's still not enough, more borrowing in your name and in your children's names. Now ask the obvious next question. If you're paying the interest, who's collecting it? To understand that, we have to understand the architecture of the system, the Federal Reserve, and the way it ties private finance into the heart of government. The Fed is often sold as a neutral, technocratic central bank, above politics, managing the money supply for the good of the country. But structurally, it's a strange hybrid. At the top, in Washington, there's the Board of Governors, whose members are appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. That looks public. But beneath that are 12 regional Federal Reserve banks, New York, San Francisco, Dallas, and so on, that are literally organized like private corporations. Commercial banks in each region are required to buy stock in their regional Fed bank. That stock can't be sold on the open market, but it does pay them a legally guaranteed dividend. Each regional Fed has a board of directors, and private banks help choose many of those directors. Those regional presidents then sit on the Federal Open Market Committee, the body that decides interest rates and conducts the buying and selling of government debt. So when people say the Fed is made up of private banks and private boards, what they're pointing at is this structure, a central institution that controls money and credit, whose regional arms are literally owned by member banks, whose boards are partly selected by those banks, and whose decisions directly affect bank profits. Formally, yes, there is public oversight. But practically, it is an insiders' club of bankers, economists, and financial elites who rotate between Wall Street and Washington. Their worldview, their interests, their assumptions about what must be saved at all costs are deeply aligned with the financial sector. Now, layer on top of that the behavior of Congress over the last 30 years. In theory, Congress decides how much to tax and how much to spend. In practice, over and over again, we've seen the same pattern: huge spending commitments and tax decisions that are not fully paid for, leading to chronic deficits that must be financed with new debt. Trillions for overseas wars that many Americans now view as unnecessary or disastrously mismanaged. Trillions more for emergency bailouts, special carve-outs, corporate welfare, opaque programs that explode in cost and rarely seem to get rolled back. And neither major party has clean hands in this. Under both Republican and Democratic majorities, the United States has almost never run a balanced budget in the last 3 decades. Elections come and go, rhetoric changes, but the line on the chart keeps bending upward. More debt, more interest, more of the tax base locked in to satisfy creditors before any democratic debate about new priorities even begins. Here's how the machinery works behind the scenes. When Congress votes to spend more than it takes in through taxes, the Treasury has to make up the difference. It does that by issuing bonds, promises to pay in the future with interest attached. Those bonds are sold into financial markets. Who buys them? Banks, hedge funds, pension funds, foreign central banks, wealthy individuals, and, crucially, the Federal Reserve itself. When the Fed wants to inject money into the system, it literally creates new dollars on a computer screen and uses them to buy treasury bonds from the financial sector. Those dollars flow into the banking system, and the bonds flow onto the Fed's balance sheet. Now, the Treasury owes interest on that debt, whether the bond is held by a private bank, a foreign government, or the Fed. Each year, out of the federal budget, those interest payments are made. For bonds held by private parties, banks, funds, wealthy investors, foreign governments, that interest is pure income. It's a nearly risk-free stream of cash backed by the full taxing power of the United States. They get paid first. For bonds held by the Fed, the interest technically flows back into the government's hands after the Fed covers its own costs and pays fixed dividends to the member banks that hold its shares. But even there, the structure ensures that private banks earn a steady, legally protected return on the capital they are required to lock into the Federal Reserve System. And because the Fed's interventions help stabilize and inflate the value of financial assets, Wall Street benefits massively from the central bank's role as lender of last resort and buyer of last resort. So step back. Congress runs deficits. Treasury issues bonds. The Fed and the banking system turn those bonds into new money and new reserves. The public pays taxes and inflation to support the system. Banks and other big holders of government debt receive streams of interest funded by those taxes. The bigger the outstanding debt, the larger that stream becomes. Today, with total federal debt approaching $40 trillion, that stream is roughly $1 trillion a year and rising. $1 trillion in interest every year. Ask yourself, who's really being served by that structure? The average American certainly doesn't feel like they're getting $1 trillion worth of extra security, prosperity, or freedom. Instead, they see crumbling infrastructure, unaffordable housing, broken healthcare, stagnant real wages, and constant anxiety about retirement. Yet every year, before any of those issues can be seriously addressed, the first claim on federal resources is interest on past borrowing that funded wars many people opposed, programs and bailouts that disproportionately helped the already powerful, and tax cuts whose benefits heavily skewed toward those at the top. Over 30 years, both parties have taken turns driving the car, but they've all pressed the accelerator on debt. War in the Middle East and Central Asia, massive expansions of surveillance and security bureaucracies, bailouts for too-big-to-fail institutions, emergency packages that ballooned far beyond their advertised purposes, tax and spending deals that the political class sells as investments in the future, while the financing is deferred to that future in the form of more bonds and more interest. And through it all, one constant: the financial markets must be kept happy. The bond auctions must succeed. The rating agencies must be appeased. The interest must be paid on time, in full, no matter what else gets cut or delayed. This is where people say, the banks essentially own the government. Not in the cartoonish sense of walking into Congress with contracts of ownership, but in the deeper sense that the survival of the political class depends on keeping the financial class willing to roll over and hold the debt. If major banks and big investors ever lost confidence and refused to buy new treasuries without huge concessions, higher interest, special guarantees, favorable regulations, the government would be cornered. The pressure would be immediate and brutal. Politicians know this. So do central bankers. That's why in every crisis the reflex is the same. Stabilize the bond market at all costs. Cut rates, print money, launch emergency programs, guarantee everything that needs to be guaranteed to keep the debt machine running. The taxpayer is never asked directly whether they consent to this. They're told it's necessary to prevent collapse. But over time, this logic creates a kind of quiet financial servitude. Every new deficit pushes the total debt higher. Every uptick in interest rates makes that debt more expensive to roll over. Every year that passes locks in a larger share of your work, and your children's work, to servicing bonds owned by people and institutions you will never meet. And because those bondholders include the very same financial giants that influence campaigns, fund think tanks, shape media narratives, and staff the upper echelons of the Treasury and the Fed, the system has a built-in bias toward protecting their interests first. Is that literal slavery? No. You can quit your job, move, change careers. But structurally, there is a parallel. You are compelled by law to hand over a portion of your labor, your taxes, under a system where a huge and growing slice of that money is not going to build something new or to provide a service you can see, but simply to honor financial promises made long ago, largely without your informed consent, to creditors whose power over the state grows with every passing year. The Federal Reserve sits at the center of this architecture. It doesn't single-handedly enslave the public, and it didn't create the debt on its own. Congress did that. Presidents signed the laws. Voters often rewarded them for goodies in the short term. But the Fed provides the grease. It ensures there is always a buyer for government debt when markets get nervous. It sets the interest rate environment that determines how much taxpayers will ultimately owe. It backstops the banking system so that banks can profit from holding and trading treasuries with minimal fear of catastrophic loss. And its structure, those regional banks owned by member banks, those private sector directors with real influence, means that private financial interests are wired directly into the control room of money itself. When critics say the Federal Reserve enslaves the American public with debt issuance, what they're really pointing at is this feedback loop. A loop where Congress's addiction to deficit spending intersects with a central bank designed to protect financial stability above all else, and with a financial sector that has found a nearly risk-free way to live off streams of interest funded by taxpayers. A loop where, year after year, the first and largest claims on the nation's resources go not to new inventions, stronger communities, or better lives, but to honoring the past demands of bondholders. You don't get a clear up or down vote on this system. You inherit it. You're told it's too complicated for ordinary people to question. You're warned that any serious challenge to it will bring chaos, collapse, or worse. Meanwhile, the numbers keep growing, the interest meter keeps running, and the window for genuine reform gets smaller. The point of laying all this out isn't to make you despair. It's to make you see the structure. Once you see it, you can stop blaming yourself for not working hard enough, or not budgeting well enough, when the truth is that the playing field itself is tilted, that a significant portion of your effort is quietly siphoned off to sustain a debt machine designed decades ago around the needs and assumptions of banks, first, and citizens, second. Awareness is the first step. The next steps, demanding fiscal honesty from Congress, rethinking the role and structure of the Fed, insisting that war and massive programs be paid for honestly in the present instead of hidden in future debt. Those are political fights. But no political change is possible as long as people don't understand the cage they're in. Right now, that cage is made not of iron bars, but of balance sheets, bond markets, and a central bank and Congress that have normalized permanent indebtedness as the way America does business. Until that changes, the interest meter will keep running. The debt will keep climbing toward and beyond 40 trillion, and every year, $1 trillion or more of your collective work will go first to satisfy claims held by a creditor class that has, in practice, far more leverage over the government than you do.